don't you start?
Hi, I'm really interested in your work with the Save the Cat Writes a Novel beat sheet, because I just discovered that several months ago, and I was totally in the weeds on the revision of my novel. I have the whole draft, actually a few drafts, and I couldn't get a handle on it. And that thing has just changed my life.
Right.
I had read the original Save the Cat, and really, I don't know, I wasn't impressed. Maybe it was the timing, like you said, or maybe it's kind of a different approach for strictly for screenwriting that didn't seem to fit me. But the Save the Cat Writes a Novel goes into so much more detail about how each beat functions, that I just found it really eye-opening, and it's just given me a lot more direction in what I'm trying to do to finish this thing. So I guess my question would be really, um, what kind of flexibility do you maintain when you're working with that? Once you get what you think is a beat sheet and you're ready to start writing chapters, do you find that it heads in a different direction, or you have to change some of the beats, or shuffle them, or drop one, or maybe one doesn't work for this book? Or so if you could talk about how you work with it in the ongoing process.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Good question. I'm actually sort of in the process of changing how I work with Jessica Brody's beat sheet. What I did is I created a template for myself that has each of the beats and then some of her most salient points about what that beat does, kind of just like a 2 or 3 sentence description of what the beat does. And in the past, I would outline it using that kind of template, and then I would take that and turn it into scene by scene breakdown of what I thought was going to happen. And then I would kind of forget about the beat sheet and just let it go. But the novel I'm working on now, I keep checking in with the beat sheet and thinking about page numbers and whether it's happening in the right moment. You know, with screenplays, of course, it's a little bit easier because you're usually working with like a 90 to 110 page format, and it is pretty strict, you know, whereas novels have a lot more range in terms of how long they can be. But I guess the short answer is I used to just outline it and then let go of the beat sheet entirely, and now I find myself checking in more and thinking about where I am in the story and whether it's matching up with my beat sheet, and rewriting my beat sheet as surprises happen, right? So, you know, sometimes a character makes a decision that makes a lot of sense to me in the moment, but I didn't foresee when I was outlining it. And so I will often revise my outlines as I'm working. So, you know, to maintain a certain amount of fluidity. Roy, what genre are you working in, out of curiosity?
I'm calling it upmarket fiction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's semi-literary, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to make it commercially appealing, at least.
Sure. Great. Thanks for your
answer.
All right. Chris, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm like a bit of a Scrivener geek. So I'm wondering, like, how do you organize yourself in Scrivener? When you write, do you just write in like one kind of big text file, or do you have lots of fragments that you like to move around in? And I mean, do you do like a lot of outlining? Do you use it as an outliner too?
Yeah, I have a lot of folders. You know, I have folders for every chapter, and then sub documents for each of the scenes within that chapter. And then I usually have another file just called like character images, another folder for places. I didn't used to do this, but I seem to have problems with spatial relations. So I really like to grab a room, you know, an image of a room, and then that's the character's room. You know, that's where the scene is happening. So I use it that way. Sometimes I use the split screen mode so that I can look at the room and write the scene. So yeah, it's evolved for me, and I'm sure there are probably a lot of tools that Scrivener has that I'm not even using. I do like the name generator too. It's pretty fun. So, but kind of limited. But yeah, so I usually have a ton of folders. I also have a folder for notes. So when I start to gather feedback from beta readers or from my agent or from an editor, then I can keep those notes there and also kind of compare them to one another and see what lines up. I almost always create a revision to-do list for each new draft. So I have bullet points of what I want to do, and I will often use those bullet points to go into the scenes and make notes for myself about what needs to change in each of these scenes. So it's been a real life changer for me because, it used to be just Word and just draft after draft. It's so messy. So yeah.
Carol.
There's another Scrivener geek.
Carol?
There you go. Yeah, after hearing you talk, maybe I will be a Scrivener geek. Right now, I'm not. But anyways, I wanted to talk more about genre jumping because I have an agent who never represented science fiction before she represented mine. But then I sent her another manuscript. This is like a couple years ago, and she said, "Oh, this is it was more like historical, magical realism." She says, "Well, this isn't you. You'd probably have to write it under a pseudonym." At the time, I probably have 2 more near future sci-fis in my head, but after that, I always dream of going back to that historical whatever. And do you think that? She would represent it. She does represent that sort of thing. Do you think that that kind of branding is that important after a while that you couldn't just venture off into something else under your same name?
Mm-hmm. I think there's a constant tension between, I think most creative personalities like to grow. We like to do different things and take on new challenges and not just keep writing the same type of thing over and over again. I think that's pretty true of most creative people. But there is a certain amount of pressure to brand yourself and to be consistent. I personally think that it's not as important as being really committed and in love with what you're working on right then. I think if you feel a calling to return to that magic realism, historical fiction, and that pull is strong, if it's a beautiful book, someone's going to buy it and readers are going to appreciate it, so I'm not a fan of branding per se. I get it. I understand from a marketing point of view why it could be important. And I think if you're the kind of writer who can be consistent and not have any problem with that, don't feel stymied by it in any way, then go for it. Because yeah, it probably is better marketing advice to, you are sci-fi, this is what you do, it's easy for people to link that genre to your name. But I don't think that as an artist, you should continue to live there if it's not really speaking to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Carol, are you the Mother Code author?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome. Sharon was telling me about that. Congratulations.
Yeah. Yep, that's out there now. In a way, it's a little bit of magical realism of its own, and I always had that in my mind when I was writing it, kind of the magicalness that enters science fiction, and I think that's why a lot of people do love science fiction, is because there's always a little bit of magic in it.
Right. Well, and the pseudonym does offer a lot of freedom. And I also don't think there's anything wrong with that. There have been a couple of times when I thought about taking on a pen name, but it seemed like starting from scratch in a way that wasn't quite worth it for me. So, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So does anybody else have a question? I have no raised hands at the moment. So I'm going to ask the next one while everybody else thinks of their questions. I realize that we left the main part of the conversation without me asking you for how you managed to be so prolific in terms of actual pragmatic, what can all 20 people here do to get a little bit more productive tomorrow?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I have a couple of tricks that I've picked up along the way. One of them I found in a songwriting, like how to write songs sort of book. And basically he recommends that when you wake up, that you give yourself a prompt, usually something as simple as an object. Like, I'm looking at this pear-shaped candle in my office, so I could grab that and make that my prompt, a pear-shaped candle, and then just really set the timer for 10 minutes or 15 if you're feeling indulgent, and write out all of the sensory details. You can go into a scene but stay with all of the senses. And the author's theory was that our inner writer is kind of sluggish and lazy. And if we wake them up first thing in the morning, that everything we see during the day will start to, lend itself to metaphor. We'll pay more attention to the details. So I have used that for years and find it very helpful. I also heard an author speak recently about what she called like first thing 350 or something like that, where rather than a writing exercise, you dive into your current project and try to get 350 words just before you're even really awake. Maybe you just have your coffee and you're just diving right into it, and then give yourself a break and then come back to it in intervals. So, and I do think that is, I've been experimenting with that more this summer. And I guess the fundamental principle is, writing first thing, even if you don't have time to spend to spend hours on it, to try to get some words in, so that when you're going about your day, it's starting to kind of marinate, and you're already, you've got those creative wheels turning. And the 1,000 words a day is not, I feel a little like a hypocrite because the semester just started for me, so I haven't been doing that, but that is a pretty ongoing goal for me to write 1,000 words a day on the project that I'm working on.
Mm-hmm. 1,000 words a day. So are your novels, I'm going to guess, are in the 80 to 100,000 range?
Yeah.
80 days. So that's how you get your 3-month draft.
Well, and I'm a real binge writer, so there's a kind of desperation that happens for me in the summer season because I'm usually not teaching or not teaching as much. So I usually double it in the summer. I try to write 2,000 a day. Yeah. I mean, I think, once someone was asking me, well, how long does that take you? And that's not possible to quantify. I mean, 5 words could take me an hour if I'm really moving slowly. So, but it's more about keeping up the momentum, I think. Whatever works for you to keep up the momentum.
Great. Thank you very much, Jody. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.